I'll start off. I'm going to one-up Michelle. I've worked with a lot of great leaders in my career. She is at the top of that list. And the challenges of putting together, this is not an easy event to organize and have it run so smoothly. And it's just incredible how well she and her leadership team perform on this. So huge thanks. The second thing is I want to just sort of give a shout out to this group. If somebody said to me, your job, your challenge is to put into a time capsule something that represents the very best of humanity in the year 2019, I would want to capture the dedication, the competence, the commitment, and the passion of this room. So save that thought, but you guys are doing amazing things. So I'd like to start, this is a little bit of a personal anecdote. And some of you in this room know my wife, but my wife, I travel a lot. I'm probably in a hotel room 275 nights a year. And the only thing that keeps me sane is my wife travels with me most of the time. And one thing about my wife is she loves farmers markets. So wherever we go, it's like the first thing we're looking at is a farmer. I think we can buy butternut squash 15 miles from here at a farmer's market. You want to go? Now, my wife loves farmers markets. I love my wife. So I go to a lot of farmers markets. But I don't really love farmers markets. And I'm just not wired that way. You go to a farmer's market and people are really friendly and they smile and they check things out and they say, oh, that's very interesting. I love that. I'll think about doing that. And everybody goes home and life isn't that different after you've been to a farmer's market. I also go to a lot of education events. This is the very best, but I go to a lot of them. And when I'm there, I feel like I'm at a farmer's market. And I talk to people afterwards and I say, how did it go? And they say, oh, it's wonderful. We did a lot of bonding. There were so many great conversations. We did a lot of reflecting. But when they get back, life isn't that different. So I'm going to ask everybody, wherever you are on that scale of farmer's market, I want you to put that mindset to the side for the next hour. This hour, by the way, I have to preview. I know some of you think you want to leave early for the airport. You do not. We have world premieres, some short videos. We have an ending that you've never been done at a conference before. We have somebody here who is not only literally a rock star, he's figuratively a rock star. We've got Daryl Adams, who he's in my book. He was a superintendent at Coachella, but he and his band toured for 6 years with Hall & Oates. And so you're not going to see your normal ending to this conference. So miss that flight. But back to farmer's market. So farmer's market is going outside for the next hour. And I want you to visualize, I bet everybody here has seen the movie Apollo 13. So mission to put people on the moon, technical failure. We are in mission control, okay? Remember that great scene where they come in and there's this team of people, dedicated, passionate, expert, and they dump on the table a whole kit of parts. And they say, you've got 2 hours to take these parts and design something that will save this space capsule. And if you do, we will land this mission. Not only will we avert death, this will be the finest hour of the United States space program. But if you don't, the space capsule is disintegrating. Lives are lost, the nation's humiliated. So I want you to have that mindset, because that's the mindset I wake up with every day. It's an urgent mindset. It's the sense that we have to get into gear in terms of affecting real change. And so I want to start with one reason we have to. I want to walk through why this isn't science fiction. So follow with me for a second. I've been involved with innovation for a long time. Probably when you look at me, you say, yep, absolutely. I can imagine that's been a long time. But for 50 years, I don't go quite back that far, but in terms of involvement, I'm certainly over 50. But for 50 years or so, since the first integrated circuit came out, the price performance of machine intelligence has doubled every 2 years. Doubling every 2 years, let's walk that through what that means. If it doubles every 2 years, in 4 years it's 4x, 6 years it's 8x, 8 years it's 16x, and in 10 years, in a decade, it's 32 times as powerful as it was at the beginning of the decade. In 20 years, it's over 1,000 times as powerful, 3 orders of magnitude. So now let's make that real, okay? A little over 10 years ago, the first smartphone came out. So let's just think of machine intelligence a decade ago as being about the size of a smartphone, more or less this clicker. Well, 10 years later, it's my height. 10 years from now, it's the height of the ceiling. 10 years beyond that, it's as big as the world's biggest skyscraper. So when people say what we just saw isn't going to happen, it's absolutely going to happen. When you read one of these studies, and there are some of the most poorly thought out studies that will say in 10 years, 33.6% of the jobs today will be gone. The reason those people write those studies is they don't understand anything about innovation. The truth is, in 10 years, we have no idea. If we could really imagine what's happening in 10 years, we should all start a company. It is beyond our imagination. But here's what we do know. Anything that's routine will be done by a machine. Anything low-level pattern recognition will be done by a machine. All sorts of things. Every job will change. Many will disappear. The ones that remain will be different. But also, and this is very important, there are new jobs to be created, and lots of them. No upper limit to the new jobs. And so this technology, as it affects careers, is the sharpest of two-edged swords. It's going to do incredible damage to some people, but it's going to lift up other people. And that balance, where we come out on that with our kids, will tell the tale of what happens in our country. So today, for instance, Lyft is going public today, right? Think about Lyft. 1,000 people or so are going to be gushing in wealth. A whole bunch of people have jobs they're piecing together just to put food on the table driving Lyft, but we know, that those drivers are going to be out of work in 5 to 10 years because Lyft will be driverless. And then think of all the people who drive taxis, have car service companies, drive trucks, It's not 1,000 people that are going to be out of work. It's going to be 100,000, a million, millions of people. That's what's happening with Lyft. And Lyft didn't exist 10 years ago, okay? So that's what's going on in our country. But it's more important than that. It gets at, yesterday I was up in San Francisco, and this isn't a political endorsement, but I met this guy who's running for president, the mayor of South Bend, Pete Buttigieg. You need to listen to him, right? You would think that a mayor of a town like South Bend, 100,000 people, would not be that perceptive and interesting when it comes to the future of our country. But he talks so compellingly about the fact that when you lose those jobs, when car plants shut down, when a town or a community is eviscerated, it goes beyond economics. It goes to the core sense of purpose that people have in their lives. And when people lose the purpose they get from daily livelihood, other things run in and fill it. You see opioid addictions. You see, he says, people go to the ballot box, they just want to burn the house down. Here's what I think is interesting, though, and then relevant to this room, is, and you guys are doing incredible things in schools, so I'm not saying that this is true of your schools, but I visit a lot of schools. In almost any school I go to, if you plop down a kid who is really good at memorizing material, replicating low-level procedures, and following instructions, that kid will be on the honor roll of that school. Ask yourself, if that kid came to your school, would they be on your honor roll? They probably would be. Those three things, memorizing material, replicating low-level procedures, following instructions, is exactly what machine intelligence does rapidly, almost instantly, error-free, and increasingly inexpensively. So this is really bearing down on us. But as I said, it's not necessarily bad news. It's in our power to determine whether it's bad or good news. That's what got me going on education initially. That's what switched me from farmer's market to Apollo 13. But there's a second aspect to technology we have to understand. And we'll just take a quick look at this, if I get it right. So it is affecting the way we come together, the way we work as collectives, the way we engage with each other civilly, our governance. So look at these headlines, right? Look at these headlines. We all gushed, we all gushed with the enthusiasm around Facebook. You know, it bringing us together, sharing birthday pictures. It's, you know, all the things they say in their ads. It seemed like an unambiguous positive thing. And it does have positive aspects. But when you look at what's happening in our country, it is also a powerful tool to pull us apart. And you're all in school settings. I want to highlight one in particular. Where is it? Yes, upper right. Think of that kid, whatever grade level you're talking about, the kid that's just a sweet, nice kid, but is being bullied. We are right at the cusp of anybody being able to take a picture of somebody and graft it onto the most awful of videos and share it without being traceable. So now you think of that kid who suddenly everybody in the school is seeing a picture of them doing the most horrendously awful things. You can't get that out of people's minds. That's not just a nick or a cut on that kid's psyche. That's scarring for life. That is just the most dangerous thing. Yet, when I visit schools, another thing, how many schools require kids to be really good at fact-checking to graduate? Probably few to maybe none. Arguably one of the most important skills we could have in our democracy today, and we don't teach it. And you know what, if our mindset is let's just wait for AP fact-checking, you know, we'll have something about how you troubleshoot, you know, MySpace or Friendster in 2030. You know, schools need to be agile. They need to move fast. Now, the thing that gives me hope, the reason I'm so excited, think of what we have to work with. And I always love to have people start with visualize a 4 or 5-year-old. Okay, what do you see when you hang around 4 and 5-year-olds? I mean, they ask a million questions. They think outside the box. They go at things. When they learn it, they don't just temporarily learn it. They learn it forever. Failure doesn't mean anything to them. They are off and running. 4 and 5-year-olds are exactly the kind of kids that are going to do really well in a world defined by innovation, by constant change, if we just don't mess it up. What else is really interesting? The second thing is, and I'm going to give a shout out to the student teams here. You spend time with kids in America, these are great kids. They're not afraid of taking on the problems that my generation kind of swept under the rug. They want to do great things. They are going to do great things. The third thing, and when I took my trip 3 years ago, I went to all 50 states, you know, wrote the book, What School Could Be. I visited a lot of the schools in this room. When it comes to how we prepare kids for this world, this is not nuclear fusion where we're trying to find an invention. This is not an anti-gravity machine. You guys know what to do. You know exactly what to do. We're doing it. The problem is, and the phrase I use is, it's everywhere and nowhere. Anywhere I went, I could find great examples, but most kids, and I would argue it might be 95%, it might be 98% of kids are memorizing material, replicating low-level procedures, following instructions. Those kids will keep going through the motions of school. They'll go to college. They'll go through the motions of college. They'll get to the end of that path. They'll go to the career services office, sign up for interview sheets, not jobs they want to do. If you mention, I mean, I tell you, when I talk to college seniors and I say, what's a career path you can create for yourself? They look at me like I've got 3 heads. Why? Because they've been jumping hoops for 16 years. And then when they don't get that job they want, despite having a lot of student loan debt, what do? They go and get a master's degree so they can jump through more hoops. And then they get to the end of that and they say, maybe I should get a PhD. You know, and if that's what we do, if we don't teach kids how to create their own path forward, how to leverage the existing resources that are out there, we are going to be serving these kids so poorly. And that's the balance. That's what hangs in the balance. Because if we get this right, back to the Apollo 13, if we get this right, not just in your schools, but broadly across our country, we're going into the best of all times. But if we get this wrong, and this has been my obsession for a decade, if we get this wrong, I'm not convinced our democracy hangs together. So this space capsule's up there. We have to land it. We don't have a lot of time to do it. We've got the talent here. We've got the elements, the constituent elements. We have to land this space capsule because it's not 3 astronauts. It's a future of our country. It's a future of millions of kids. And I just want to give, in my book, I have one example I love to cite, but this will give you an example of the types of things. It's one kid, but it's so many kids. I meet this high school senior in Vermont, young woman, and they tell me she's an incredible artist. She loves art. Her passion is art. And I sit down and talk to her, and she explains what went on with her. She said, I was not going to graduate from my high school. Now, she had tough family circumstances, so she doesn't have parents that can line up an internship. She doesn't have parents that can pay $600,000 to get her into the right college. She's dealing with a lot of tough stuff at home. She's having to support younger siblings, loves art, but was not going to graduate from high school in Montpelier. Why? Because she couldn't pass an algebra class. Now, anybody here, there's some math teachers here, but if you're not a math teacher, tell me when the last time is you solved simultaneous equations. Tell me the last time you solved for unknowns, factored polynomials. Only 15% of adults in America use algebra at all. But we block kids from getting a high school diploma over a course that very few people use. What happened to her, though? What happened to her? Her school and Rebecca Holcomb in Vermont had this program called Branching Out. And that let her swap out an obsolete requirement that she didn't care about and could make a case she never used for something she was interested in. So she goes to her school and says, instead of algebra, could I learn how to design websites? And they said, well, we don't have anybody here to teach you that. And she said, which will not surprise one person in this room, she said, nobody has to teach me that. Just give me the time that I can learn it. And so what happened? She graduates from high school, but do you know what you can make on Upwork as a great, really capable, great artist who can design websites? You can make $30 an hour. And you can market that capability not just to organizations in Montpelier, Vermont, you can market to organizations all around the globe. And so that's that small story, but that's the story of so many kids. They're good at things. They're good at things that really will let them create great life paths forward. But if we continue to insist on this standardized model of often obsolete and irrelevant content, so many kids are going to be in deep, deep trouble. And the more kids that come out on the wrong side of this equation, the more I worry that space capsule is not going to be safely landed, but it's going to disintegrate. So one of the things that I've been obsessed with in the last 4 years, so I did the film, I started traveling with that. I love this school. The film's about high-tech high to a very large extent. Over and over again, people said to me, that's great, but they had an unfair advantage. They started from scratch, and if you start from scratch, you can create an innovative school. We're not starting from scratch. How do you help an existing school change? And I've come to believe that's the single most important issue in education. How do we help an existing school change? I had dinner about a year ago with Jim Ryan. He was, at the time, Dean of Harvard Graduate School of Education. Now he's president of UVA. I said, Jim, how many schools of education offer a course on how do you help an existing school change? His answer was, I don't think any. So how is it the most important challenge we have is not getting any attention? So I've been working on this thing, and I want you, as I walk you through this, to put farmers market out the door, Apollo 13. So this is an effort we're trying to get going, and we're getting some really great traction. But there's so many great things going on. There are great initiatives represented here in this room. There are great teaching practices that I write about in my book, What School Could Be, all over the country. How can we collectively accomplish something that on our own we can't accomplish? And how can we put it in a framework that really can reach, you're here because you're leaning in. You're here because you're doing great things. But you need to bring your community along. You need to bring the other schools in your community along, because if we don't bring enough schools along, that space capsule is going to disintegrate. And so the idea here, I'll just walk through a couple things. We do have, just today we've got all new video resources for almost everything here. So here's how it works. We've got, first, you never change a school unless your community is excited. Over and over I meet people and they're that lone innovator in a school. Everybody else is grumpy about it. If you're the one person trying to change your school, you will not change, you'll just wear out. So what can we do to get your school community excited? But more importantly, what can you do? What can you encourage a neighboring school to do to get that neighboring school excited? Because every school has its change agents. So we say, please, please, please start with something we call, it's sort of like a Spotify Pandora metaphor, albums and songs. Start by getting your community excited about innovating. And so we've got all these great videos. I'm doing a lot with Ken Robinson on this. So build momentum, send out things, future work videos on it. Prince EA, I don't know how many of you have seen What is School For, but that's something I supported Prince on. Then build up to, the film most likely to succeed. There are other ways to do it, but that film, people thought when I turned down Netflix after it premiered at Sundance that I was the stupidest guy in the world. And they may be right about how stupid I am, but they were wrong. They were absolutely wrong about turning down Netflix. That's the best move I ever made. We've done now, I'd say 10,000 community screenings all around the world, 35 countries. But I want you to pay attention to this. About a year ago, a group came from Beijing trying to get me to come to Beijing for a tour around all of China. And I didn't want to, and I didn't go. And I told them I don't get up every morning trying to fix education in China. I've got enough things going on here. But then they shared with me this. They said, well, you should know this. The films have been pirated in China, and it's being shown online, and they're doing online showings where people can sort of sign up, watch it, have chat rooms after. I said, well, fair enough. And then they said, you should also know that when we do that, we're getting 10 to 25,000 people at a time watching the film. Not 10 to 25 people, 10 to 25,000 people. So if they're moving at that pace, will they get it right? I don't know. There are a lot of issues there, but they have an Apollo 13 mindset. They don't have a farmer's market mindset. They have an Apollo 13 mindset. And so get your community excited. Maybe have your student film team capture that. Share it with schools in your community, because what I say is it's a lot easier to have 10 teachers in a school be innovative than one. It's a lot easier to have 10 schools in a community be innovative than one. And if we don't start spreading this, the space capsule will disintegrate. The second thing is, so then we said, what do we do when we start trying to actually reach classrooms? And these aren't my ideas. They are absolutely not my ideas. I'm the biggest plagiarist with this because I've learned so much from you guys. I just pay attention and say, what are you guys doing that works? And so the mantra here is small steps lead to big change. And so if you look at so just think, supposing you guys were at just the most conventional school in the world and you knew you needed to change it, but you didn't have much buy-in. I promise in a month with the first thing, with Mobilize Your Community will be so energized about change. Then go to student-led learning. So here's how this works. We start with the simplest of things. A small block of time to let kids in your class come up with their own thought-provoking questions. I was kind of amazed. This group does that a lot, I know, but I would go to groups with a lot of educators and say, how many of you on a regular basis just give your students time to come up with thought-provoking questions? The answer was less than 5%. How many of you actually have as part of the assessment, not a student's class participation by raising their hand to answer a fact-based question, but coming up with a thought-provoking question? 0%. Then you talk to adults. Who do you want to hire? For-profits, nonprofits, whatever. Who do you want to hire? We want to hire people that ask thought-provoking questions. We don't want kids that can give us an answer we can look up on Google. Thought-provoking questions are what matter. Well, if we don't do any of that in schools, are kids going to get good at thought-provoking questions? When we do this in schools, by the way, you'll appreciate this. Elementary school kids come up with great questions. High school kids don't. And by the time they get to high school, the only question they really care about is, will this be on the test? So then you say, now you're back to this conventional school. You've got everybody now energized and leaning in because you've got a process around mobilizing them. Then you say, not every teacher has to. The whole thing is permission driven, celebrate what happens that's good. Not every teacher has to. Do we have any teachers in our school that would try in this entire next month, one stinking 20-minute block of curiosity time? We got a 12-minute video that shows a master practitioner, what it's like in a classroom, interviews with students on how it went for them, lays out, if you've never done it before, these are the things to keep in mind. One stinking 20-minute period of curiosity time this month, but then come back next month at our faculty meeting and tell us how it went. You know this. I don't care how conventional the school is. There are so many teachers itching to innovate. But don't tell them all have to. Just say who wants to, we're excited for that. And what happens, and we're getting this feedback as we pilot this, is that they come back and they say, oh my God, it was so interesting. Kids that were not participating had the greatest questions. All these things bubble up. What happens the next month? The ones that were the early adopters will keep doing it, maybe even do more. But the sprinters sprint, the runners run, the walkers walk. And I always say, if you got somebody that's absolutely dead set on staying in place, just ask them to keep an open mind. Don't tell somebody to do something they don't want to do. Just keep an open mind. But what we try to do with this playlist concept is let it build in a sequence. Follow curiosity time with the Socratic seminar. Follow Socratic seminar with free exploration during a class period. Build, build, build. And so this model, and this is where I need your help, okay? I need your help. These are your ideas. And what we're finding is teachers all over the country are saying, I'm doing this, can we capture it? Can we contribute it? And we're getting the most amazing set of things. But if you have the farmer's market mindset, you will go back and you say, that was kind of interesting, and you probably won't even look at it. If you have the Apollo 13 mindset, here's what you'll do. You'll look at it, you'll send me feedback about what's good and bad about it, you'll try it in your school on Monday morning, you'll encourage people in your community to check this out, you'll help me find it. I'm looking for like a CEO for this who could be full-time, driving it forward and making it great. You'll send me suggestions for things you want to do, whether they're playlist items or albums, big ideas or small steps that get you there. If we can do that collectively, and this is not my playlist, it's your playlist. If we can do this, we have this resource that does this very, very important thing. It doesn't just help the change agents be better, it helps the change agents elevate what's going on across their entire school. That's very important. So another couple things, I think I can announce this. So I negotiated back from my publisher the paperback rights to my book. I own the film. Come June, we're going to have an accelerator kit available. So any school that wants to dive in with these resources, just send us like a paragraph or two of what you're going to do with them, and I'm going to be sending you the DVD to Most Likely to Succeed, copies of the book, online access to the film, a handbook on the playlist, pointing to all the things you're doing. For those that are doing their own initiatives, this is a great on-ramp. There are a lot of things here that are so great, but they could be used everywhere. But if we start giving schools across the country these small steps that let them gain confidence, you'll start seeing radical change in these schools. And I do see it. I see it in schools. I see it in districts. I'm doing things in several states. We just kicked off a statewide thing in Virginia 2 weeks ago. Again, permission model. We reached out to all districts. We said, all districts don't have to. Which districts want to? We said we could support 20 in the first year. We got 56 that applied. We ended up taking 26. We all met in Richmond 2 weeks ago. I said to them, districts, you're here, you're leaning in. Don't say all schools have to, say which schools want to. So much better. Principals, don't say all teachers have to, say which teachers want to. And it sounds like we're diluting it down, but it gets at that core thing that makes us human. If people are trusted to lead the way, if they're doing something they think is important, if they're not told to do it, but they're supported to do it, amazing things happen. Apollo 13 versus farmer's market. I want to show you, we're doing a lot of work with a different set of teachers. But I want to show you, this is world premiere. It's not totally done yet, but here you go.
We are united! We are united!
For a long time as educators, we've just been doing more and more with less and less.
So much has been done to the Arizona schools, from charter schools and no accountability to vouchers.
I walked through schools and saw, do not turn off the lights or cockroaches will come out. I flipped through textbooks where the binding was held together by duct tape.
There's one story that sticks with me about a teacher who comes home. She gives her 8-year-old twins to her 11-year-old son. She goes to work at Amazon where she loads trucks until 2 in the morning and teaches school the very next day.
It's a nonpartisan issue. Education is nonpartisan. It is the great equalizer. It doesn't make a difference what side of the aisle you're on. Education should be a priority.
In front of me me was just a sea of red. All these amazing signs, and you could hear the band playing in the background. And it was the one moment before the storm to hear and feel it for a second, and knowing that we were at the forefront of a massive labor movement in our state.
People are coming together, community groups are coming together. It's like a really important moment to fight for what kind of schools we need in our communities. We're fighting for how teachers are respected, how they're paid, how they're treated, all school staff. How do we collectively across the country fight this?
These teachers need our help. They're part of what I like to call my village, that helped me as a single mom raise my kids. And if, someone in our village is in trouble, we need to fight with them.
Walking through the lineup of teachers, of parents, of kids, the empowerment of seeing people lining up to speak, that is what democracy is about. We have been complacent for too long and silent for too long. We elect people and then just leave it up to there. We have to participate. We have a collective responsibility, and it was beautiful to watch it in action.
For anyone looking at their landscape and thinking action needs to be taken, do it. Check your values, know what you believe, and stand up.
You do it to make sure that children's education is funded. You do it to make sure that they are provided the best possible public education. And you can't do that by continuing to take away education dollars.
We have to realize right now that nobody's coming to save us. We have to be the people who move the needle. We have to be the people who save our schools and save our communities and save our professions and save the very concept of a public education in the United States. We have to do that.
My dream for public schools is just to be fully funded and to be well respected, and that every teacher that is watching this movement happen will see themselves in the movement.
It's never too late to take back what's yours, and it's never too late to fight for what's yours and what's right. And so don't be afraid.
Tom Hayden used to say, change is slow except when it's fast. We're in a fast moment right now.
This is about our future. This is about our children's future. This is about our nation's future, and our actions today are what shape tomorrow.
So I promise you, these teachers are not in farmer's market mode. I thought initially when I read about it that these were strikes organized by the union heads. That wasn't true. This was grassroots. These were union and non-union teachers. You just said, the old network movie, we're mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore. Our democracy is being attacked every day. Just think of the last 2 years, right? Think of the last 2 years. Our defense budget is 3 times higher than the next biggest country's defense budget. Our military budget is bigger than the countries number 2 through 8 combined. But we're boosting that by $70 billion. Corporations are gushing profits. And Lyft today, Lyft, the 2 founders are going to each be worth more than $10 billion after the IPO. Do you know what marginal tax rate they'll pay on that gain? 15%. They're paying a lower marginal tax rate on billions of dollars than the people in this room pay. That can't be right. And if we keep gutting the budgets in education, the space capsule is not going to land, okay? But, and one of the things I'm working with them on is I am adamant. We need to pay teachers what they deserve. They're not being paid a fair wage. But it's more than that, right? We need to trust you and respect you in the classroom. I mean, I refuse at events to be introduced. Sometimes people say they tell me what they're going to say, and they'll say Ted's an education expert. I say I am not an education expert. You guys are. I listen to you. I respect it. But I'm a pretty reasonable innovation expert, but I'm not an education expert. And I say to these business people, how would you feel if your board of directors were entirely made up of teachers? And they say, well, that wouldn't make sense. What do they know about business? And I say, so why the hell do you get to jam stuff down the throats of these teachers? Not okay. It's not okay. I mean, every single one of you entered the profession to engage and inspire your kids to help them find their special gifts. And when we say they've got to do standardized content, just because it's easier for people to rank them and measure progress and stuff kids never remember that they'll never use in life, even if they did remember it, that is not okay. So, how do we take this Apollo 13 mindset and do more? So, okay, here we go. What are the leverage points? What can we do? So if we really dive in, if we make this innovation playlist, the Wikipedia, if somebody helps me find the Jimmy Wales for this, we can start letting your school move faster and we can get the other schools in your community to move faster. But there are still roadblocks. What are the ones with a lot of leverage? So let me just share with you my agony, my personal agony in dealing with college admissions. Okay, I mean, I'm not personally trying to apply to get in. You know, you will not see me on the list of people who paid $600,000. But, so I think I'm the biggest funder of the Coalition for Access. In theory, it means that kids can apply and colleges will look at a digital portfolio. That's a very good thing. Value a student on the basis of real work they did instead of a bunch of numbers on bullshit that's only loosely correlated with anything in life. And 2 of the last 3 summers, I've given the keynote to 250 college admissions officers, and I tell them, you're screwing millions of kids. When you say you want something, everybody does it. If you say take calculus, even though I know, and I'm here to tell you, that no adult does closed form integrals by hand in America, and say don't take statistics, which is essential for personal decisions, it opens up career doors, and vital for citizenship. When you say calculus and not statistics, you're making kids take something no adult does instead of something that's indispensable. You can't do that. And their answer is, well, it's hard. I say, there are a lot of things in life that are hard. That doesn't make them useful. and they look at me and they nod. Oh, it gets worse. It gets worse. So a year and a half ago, I offered through this group to 4 admissions offices innovation grants. They were moving slowly. I said, you can't move slowly. I'm going to grant you money. Come up with a creative, interesting way to start valuing kids for real work. Start accepting kids not because they've been impeccably pushed along the way by parents to be prepared. Start accepting kids that are going to make the most of the opportunity. I mean, goddamn it. I mean, when you go to these schools, colleges, and you say, who really gets something out of it? It's the first-gen kids. I was a first-gen kid. Those are the kids that see this as their chance to make a way forward that will give back to their community. So rather than taking these, and this college admission scandal is the tip of the iceberg, because as you know, for everybody that does something illegally, there are another 50 that do things legally to give their kids an advantage. And it starts with SAT test prep, which can be 4-year-olds working on an iPad with motion math, and every car drive being SAT test prep. It's like start valuing kids for real work, value kids for audacious ways to make their world better, and take kids who are going to make the most of the opportunity. And you know what the admissions officers do? They nod. They say, that's a good idea. And you know what they do? They ignore me. They totally ignore me. And you know why they ignore me? They don't have a problem. Right? We still have a collective feeding frenzy around college. They're saying, I got 20 applications for every spot. Why do I need to do anything differently? So, what about this? Let's think about Apollo 13 instead of Farmers Market. I mean, I don't know how many people here, a lot of people here. You guys are charismatic. You have a lot of friends. You can't teach unless you went to a college, right? So collectively, we represent the ability to get to a lot of colleges. Supposing we had a well-crafted starting message, polite but firm, that said, you're damaging millions of kids. Your criteria make no sense. Stop spending millions of dollars to mail these brochures out so more kids apply so you can turn them down and look more selective. Start valuing real work. Start taking kids who are going to make the most of the opportunity. We can't run millions of kids' lives around the fact that your admissions officers say I only have 7 minutes to review an application. That's not okay. But supposing that letter doesn't just go to the dean of admissions. Supposing it goes to the president. Supposing it goes to the head of development. You guys know, how often do you hear from your college, give me money? They want your money. They're businesses. They want your money. Supposing they get 1,000 letters saying, we're cutting you off. You have a chance to be a real leader here, but right now you're damaging kids. We're not giving you another penny until you make a bold statement about a reimagined admissions process. And supposing they didn't get 1 letter or 3 letters, but supposing they got 1,000 letters. Supposing those letters said politely but firmly, We're going to be reaching out to alumni chapters and getting their support. And by the way, when you do reimagine admissions and you mean it, we're going to start giving again. But until then, you're cut off. Apollo 13. State mandated regulations. I go all over the place. I met a lot of state legislators. First, it's a hard job. I mean, it's a really hard job. So have some empathy for them. Some of them are really great. I've met some really great state legislators. But I've also met a lot of state legislators. If you said to me, Ted, would you rather talk to this person or talk to a cinder block? I'm taking the cinder block. And you know what they do? I mean, so these are the people shoving down your throats stuff you know doesn't make sense. When I go to states, I look online to see the practice questions for state mandated exams. They are the most lunatic questions you could ever imagine. There's not a state in the country where a kid doesn't have to pass algebra to graduate from high school. And as I say, I know hardly any of us use it. We never have time to say how you use it. We just have time so you can drill on factoring polynomials because that's on the SAT test. And so let's make them eat their own cooking. I mean, could we get petitions demanding that these state legislators take these tests and publish their scores? You know, and if they say it's not relevant to being a state legislator, then let's say, why are we holding teachers accountable to this bullshit? Why are we keeping kids from getting, if you are a kid, particularly in poor circumstances, that does not have a high school degree in America today, you're headed for homelessness or jail. That is a fact. Do we ask kids to take financial literacy? No. Do colleges demand that? No. Do I talk to a lot of seniors in college and I say, how much is your student loan debt? And they say $75,000. I say, how the hell did you get there? And they say, I don't know, I just signed some papers. So colleges don't want kids to take financial literacy, right? Because they stopped borrowing all that money. But supposing Apollo 13, we started getting state by state petitions to say, if you're cramming this down our throats, take the test yourself and tell us how you did. Third thing, accountability 2.0. These are Tony Wagner's words, my good friend and co-author. We're not going to replace this bad stuff with nothing. There's a real opportunity. This room could start piloting more informed, more thoughtful assessments. If you were thinking of sending your kid to a school, what would you want to know about that school? We could start doing that. And so I'm not just saying this would be a good idea, and I'm going to apologize to you guys. You work so hard. I know how hard you work. It's criminal, in my opinion, to say to people who work so hard, we got to do more. But we got to, because if we don't, the spaceship is disintegrating. And I'll add one last note. When I started saying 10 years ago, I sort of connected some dots on this. Other people have connected them. I'm not original in that. But I started just saying to friends, if school doesn't change profoundly and urgently, I'm not convinced civil society will hold together. I'm not convinced our democracy will withstand this. And 10 years ago, people thought I was just plain nuts. I was sort of retiring from venture capital, and they would you could see they were whispering in the corner that retirement's not agreeing with Ted. He has totally lost it. The last 100 talks I've given, nobody holds up their hand and says that's too extreme. It's fragile. Read How Democracies Die. We are already seeing it being eroded. As I said, massive amounts of military budget. Most of those weapon systems will be obsolete when they come out. Cutting Special Olympics funding. We can give a $1.5 trillion tax break to the people who need it the least, but we're going to go after the Special Olympics? Is that the values we have as a country? Does that make sense? It makes no sense. And so, here's what I need. So there it is. So I'm looking for bold proposals. If your proposal is $250,000 to affect a few kids, don't send it to me. But let's think, if we're in Apollo 13 mode, what the hell can we do to start changing things? Because we've got to go from a few percent of our kids getting a great deal to a lot of our kids. And if we don't tip that balance, so there's a way to submit these things. It just basically we ask you, what's your idea, who you are, who's on your team, but importantly, how can we help? Do you have contacts you need? Do you need some financial support? I'm not just kidding about this. We have to do this. But we also ask, are you open to being introduced to like-minded people? And I hope you're okay. I'd love to let this run for April, let's say. And Michelle, I hope it's okay. I'd love to send an email back to all attendees saying, here's where we are. But let's get these things going. It's not that hard to start getting petitions and saying to the state legislators, eat your own cooking. It's not that hard to reach out to alums and say, go to the president and the head of development and say, no more money until you get this right. We got to do that. And so that's where we are on this. And it's terribly, terribly important. So you can help me. I'm trying to help you. But our time is now. Our time has come. Which leads me to, so the strike video, that's a world premiere. There are a bunch of videos on the playlists that are world premiere that are live now. I need the Jimmy Wales of this, so help me with that. But I want to introduce this guy. I met him. Okay, so I'm going to tell a little story. So Daryl and I sat next to each other, and I was involved with Obama from the very beginning, and I love Obama. But I've told him, and I've made it clear, that he swung and missed when it came to education. It was the biggest of all opportunities, and they got it wrong. I mean, Race to the Top should have been called Sprint to the Bottom, right? And so Daryl and I were sitting next to each other at a White House event, and we're sitting there, and on the stage are, you probably know these people, I won't mention them by name, but two leading philanthropists and a big White House person talking about the big tragedy in American schools is that 50% of kids in American schools don't have a calculus course. Now, that's easy for people to say who don't understand things. But the reality is, the right number is 0%. Schools should be teaching different things. The stuff of high school calculus can all be done on your smartphone with photomath. And so we owe it to kids when we advocate for changes to know what we're talking about. So that became a great friendship. And Daryl, as I said, I write about him in my book. He did amazing things in Coachella, and I contrast him in the book with the number of ed tech companies I meet in Silicon Valley that make me want to find an air sickness bag. Where they think, isn't it great if we can bring efficiencies to stuff that's obsolete that kids will never use? That's the wrong problem to solve. And Daryl in his district, Wi-Fi on Wheels, an amazing program. Kids were using technology to create, invent, explore. And I say, isn't it interesting, right? Isn't it interesting that the billionaires who influence policy, the DFER guys who weighed in and said it's got to be Arne Duncan, that they don't know anything about technology and education. And then you sit down with Daryl Adams and you say, this is who we need to be listening to. Daryl, the people in this room. So we have one more world premiere. Here it goes. And all these videos are on our website, but I'm thrilled to turn it over. And this is appropriate. It's out of my hands, and it's in the hands of the people that really know. So here you go.
Let's give it up for Ted Dintersmith. Stand up, give it up, give it up. All right. This is the man right here. All right, all right, we're gonna do this together. This is the world, don't stand up. This is the world's greatest sing-along. You got the lyrics on your sheet, turn it around. One of you guys hold the sheet, the other one's gonna be clapping. DJ, hit it! It's gonna be on the screen in a minute. It's coming. All right, here we go. School's in session. Put your hands together. In about 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds, we're gonna kick this thing off. Okay, let's hear it now. Deeper learning keeps me earning. Deeper learning keeps me serving. There you got it. Put your hands together now. Come on. Come on. You can sing that too. Say it. Can't hear you. Keep it going. Don't get tired now. The time has come today. Your work is shown the way. We can't put it off another day. We don't care what others say. See, more schools need to change right away. Because the time has come today. Come on, make some noise. I can't hear you. Come on, people, learning. All right, keep it going. The world is changing so fast. That's right. It's looking like the past. Yet our schools are obsolete. They're teaching worksheets and worksheets. We're just teaching to the test. And we're not helping That's right. Never gets a place and space to run. And let our teachers, that's you, be our guys. We gotta pay you though. Do with the stride now. Hey, let's create the brownest pride. And its potential we're amplified. It's time to turn the learning tide. It's time to turn the shoulder right. Say it out. Time to be done. That's right, that's you. A new future has begun. Time. It's time to learn today. Well, it's time to learn in a new way. Then deeper learning, keeps me earning, keep it going. Deeper learning, keeps me earning. Deeper learning, keep me serving. God bless you. Keep on doing God's work. You're doing God's work when you educate the kids. Help them find their passion in life. They never work a day in their life. Give it up for Ted Dintersmith.
$13.